From the womb, you were chosen. Your life has never been easy because of this. Have you ever noticed how some people appear to lead tranquil lives, while others struggle from the very beginning? Do you think that your path has never been easy, that each step has been difficult? If I told you that this isn't a coincidence, would you believe me? That's an evidence that God picked you before you were even born. The Bible makes a potent revelation. People with a purpose encounter resistance from the birth. The adversary doesn't waste time attempting to eliminate non-threatening individuals. However, the difficulties start early, when God chooses someone for something significant. Today we'll provide you with the explanation for why your life has never been simple, and it has the power to alter everything. Consider an artisan constructing a unique item. He's not rushing. He molds, polishes, cracks, and begins again. Even before the piece is completed, he recognizes its worth. Jeremiah was no different. Even before his mother realized she was expecting, God gazed upon him and said, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations." Chapter 1, verse 5 of Jeremiah. This indicates that the calling predates birth, and with you, it was the same. Few people realize, however, that being selected does not equate to an easy existence. Conversely, it entails being formed in fire. It indicates that the adversary was aware of your identity and attempted to prevent you before you even realized how valuable you were. Consider your tale. Battles that didn't seem fair, doors that shut for no apparent reason. There were times when you didn't think you could handle it. Was this merely a coincidence? Or did you already have a purpose too big to be overlooked from the start? Have you noticed how difficult life was for everyone God used? No one who was selected had an easy life. Battles have been a part of the journey since the beginning. Moses nearly didn't make it through birth. Despite Pharaoh's order to kill all Hebrew infants, God kept him safe. Chapter 2 of Exodus. While still a young man, David was crowned king, but he spent years escaping death while Saul hunted him down. 1 Samuel 18. What about Jesus? He endured 40 days of desert hunger and temptation even before he began his mission. Chapter 4, Matthew. Is there a trend here? The enemy tries to stop God whenever he chooses someone, and with you it's the same. Your life has a bigger purpose than you may have assumed, as evidenced by the times when everything seemed to fall apart and you considered giving up. You know what's best though? No conflict is pointless. Pain is never wasted by God. What appears to be a hardship now will be a testimony in the future. When God told Joseph his fate, he was still a young man. In his dream, his family would kneel down to him since he would one day be great. Genesis 37 verse 5. However, he was betrayed rather than acknowledged. His own brothers sold him as a slave because they were envious. He found himself in an unfamiliar place with no family, no rights, and nothing. As if that weren't enough, he was wrongfully charged and imprisoned just as things appeared to be improving. The 39th chapter of Genesis now, consider this. Joseph would never have made it to the palace if he had given up in the middle, because God was preparing him for something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. His life was never simple. And if you're experiencing the same thing, your current struggles are not a sign of failure, but rather of God molding you for something you cannot yet see. The glory of the goal is always greater than the suffering of the process. Have faith. Proceed. You have not yet received your palace. Fire is the only thing that makes gold shine. The clay must be kneaded and sculpted before it can be used as a vessel. Similarly, God permits some hardships to mold us into what He has intended. Before He led Israel, Moses lived in the desert for 40 years. Chapter 3 of Exodus. After being proclaimed king, David had to endure years of persecution and giants before he could take the throne. 1 Samuel 16. Even Jesus underwent a period of preparation in the wilderness prior to beginning His ministry. Chapter 4, Matthew. God will set you up for success if He has a plan for your life. Additionally, getting ready isn't always easy. It can occasionally entail losing things, parting ways with people, and dealing with difficulties you don't comprehend. One thing is for sure, though, when God shapes you, it's because something bigger is on the way. The desert is not permanent, and nothing can stop what He has planned for you when the time is right. Have you ever considered why some people appear to have no significant difficulties in life, while others have difficulties from a young age? Those who are not a threat are quickly eliminated by the enemy. However, attacks start early when someone has a divine mission. Examine the Bible. The enemies knew Moses would free Israel, so they nearly killed him when he was a baby. Herod threatened Jesus' life when he was still a kid because he knew that his calling would alter the path of human history. Exodus 1 verse 16. Jesus warned Peter that he had a huge ministry ahead of him and that Satan sought to sift him like wheat. Matthew 2 verse 16. Verses 31 and 22 of Luke. If you've always had battles in your life, it's not because God ignored you. Rather, it's because hell knew who you were before you did. The fact is, however, that no weapon created against you will succeed. Isaiah, verse 17 of chapter 54. Even if the enemy tries, he will never be able to stop what God has already decided will happen in your life. It is one thing to know that you are God's chosen one and that the enemy is working to prevent you from succeeding. But how can you maintain your resolve when things get tough? When everything appears to be challenging, how can one avoid becoming discouraged? What kept God's great men and women going holds the key to the solution. 1. Have faith in what God says. In prison, Joseph could have given up, but instead, he clung to the promise that God had given him. Genesis 40 verse 14. God will carry out His promises, whatever the situation, whatever the time. 2. Continue to pray. Jesus withdrew to pray despite knowing that the cross was imminent. Prayer makes you stronger. Luke 22:41. Your quest for God should be more intense the more difficult it is. 3. Be in the company of the appropriate people. David was accompanied by obedient men. Barnabas belonged to Paul. Jesus did not walk alone. Seek for people who deepen your relationship with God and avoid those who erode it. Chapter 27 verse 17 of Proverbs 4. Don't give up in the middle. No one ever ends up in the desert. The promise is reached by the one who keeps going. The glory of God is seen by those who persevere. Verse 36, Hebrews 10:10. You were called to something bigger if your life has never been simple. The chosen also don't back down. Knowing that God has already won for them, they move forward. Consider any difficulties you have faced along the way a validation that you are God's chosen one rather than a burden. No suffering was pointless. Not a single tear was missed. It was all part of a larger scheme. Remember Joseph? He was betrayed, sold, and imprisoned. Yet he was also given the highest position in Egypt at the perfect time. Chapter 41, verse 41 of Genesis. Recall David's years of running away, hiding in caves, and being hunted down before God put him on the throne. Chapter 5, verse 4 of 2. Samuel. And keep in mind Jesus. He was crucified, humiliated, and rejected, but he rose from the dead on the third day. Verses 6 to 28 of Matthew 28. God will do this for you if He did it for them. The goal will be magnificent, even though the process could be terrible. I would now like to know if you have ever experienced difficulties in your life that just now make sense. Have you ever had the impression that the enemy was attempting to prevent you from growing up? Leave a comment with your experience. I'll say a prayer for you. Remember to like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear this today if this word resonated with you. Until the next time, keep in mind that you were picked before you were even born.